Okay, call the meeting back in session at 6:32. Second interview this evening is Thomas Guerino, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Lynch.
Well, thank you. Chair has indicated it's Thomas Guerino. Tom is most recently the town administrator of the town of Bourne for approximately 14 years, thereabouts. Currently acting as an interim in Vernon, Vermont, and doing some project work for the town of Wareham. He's our second candidate tonight that the screening committee, the search committee felt was worthy of moving on to as a finalist. So I'll introduce Tom.
Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening.
Any objections if I shed the coat?
Not at all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So again, welcome. Thank you for your interest in Southbridge. If you could just tell us the circumstances that have led you to look for a new position and how your qualifications and experiences match up with the challenges and opportunities as detailed in the position statement.
Sure, and thank you all for having me this evening. I'm very excited to be here. To specifically answer the question, I went to Bourne in 2005 as a 90-day interim town administrator and left some 14 and a half years later. The first 13 years of that were primarily really good. We did a lot of good things. The last year to 18 months, things changed in Bourne, and it was clear politically I was not going to be successful. The select board and I came to a very amicable departure. We left shaking hands with a party and all kinds of things, and I still am in very good contact with a number of the board members today. Member just was reelected. I spoke with her that evening. It was a good time in Bourne, a good tenure. Recently, I took a few weeks off to shake 15 years off of that 14 and a half, and went to work to help the town of Wareham on some wastewater and enterprise fund issues that they were having till COVID hit, and I just recently came back to Wareham and am working on their contract administration for a number of projects they have with the wastewater facility. In Vernon, I have been helping more than anything else, more labor of love. I've lived there for 20 years and have not given anything back to the community. So I'm helping them with their recruitment for a town administrator in that little town, and helping them a couple of days a week just stay on top of the CARES Act issues and things that deal with that. I expect they have made an offer to a candidate, and I expect that will come to conclusion within the next 5 to 7 business days.
Okay. Councilor Lazo?
Yes. My question is, describe your understanding of the role of the town manager within the town of Southbridge and your anticipated relationship with the town council, and describe the process you envision of working with the Southbridge Town Council on setting goals and objectives.
Thank you, Mr. Lazo. The charter is very clear as to what the role and responsibilities of the council and the town administrator are, town manager. The council is primary. That's the way it's set up. The town manager is not a 10th counselor, if you will, but should provide the same information at the same time to all of the counselors on any particular issue that is asked by counselors. The manager runs the day-to-day operation, reports those operations back to the council, works with the department leaders to help them do their job better. I certainly am not an expert in police or fire or finance. Pretty good at finance, but But my job is to find out what the goals of the council are. And on that last part of your question, sir, my tenure with the Rural Development Council, although it sounds like it doesn't fit in municipal management, one of the things that we did nationally, for national groups as well as towns in the Commonwealth, was help various groups set their goals, objectives, benchmarks, how they were going to achieve them, how they know they reached success, when to punt. Sometimes you need to punt and start back again. Deal with those blocks that come in the road that make you have to take a different path to get to the goal. And also know when the goal that you have set may not be attainable. You may have to take a different tact and take a different look at the problem or the situation that you want to address. I have facilitated well over 200 different groups. One of those goes back a few years now. Every 18 months I was called to help facilitate the governor's rural summit for the state of Wisconsin. So I'm pretty good at that, and I could help the council come to consensus on things and try to be sure that they know what the measurable outcomes are going to be. So you have a way to track and judge how you're doing, how the manager is doing, how the department leaders are doing.
Thank you.
Councilor Adam?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you.
My question is on leadership and management style. As our town manager, your leadership and management skills will most likely be challenged in a wide range of areas, such as dealing with natural and health emergencies and/or health emergencies, personnel and personality differences, both internally and externally, cultural diversity, economic and infrastructure matters that are specific to our town, and a variety of other topics. Based on your experience and in a general answer, how do you approach these variety of issues, both as a leader and as a manager?
So as a general rule, internally my style is more familiar than formal. I believe the department leaders, and I said this a few minutes ago, I don't want to become redundant, know their jobs for the most part. There needs to be ways to measure how they're doing. And we work on that through annual or biannual reviews with established goals. I think if you look at your finance department, as an example, I had the pleasure of speaking with a number of the department heads before tonight's meeting over the last week or so. This work that's been to change over your financial software package to Munis is a huge undertaking, and I think you're getting toward the end of that right now, and both your finance director and treasurer have done it's hard work, and they've done an outstanding job to bring that forward. Bourne did not have a lot of diversity within its community. We certainly had issues relative to the Wampanoag tribe and some Aboriginal rights on fisheries and that type of thing. But we had socio-economic diversity. There was big divergence between the haves and the have-nots in Bourne, south of the bridge, north of the bridge, if you will. When we had to work with that, we had to try to bring our programs together as a municipality to be sure that everyone, regardless of ability to pay, had the opportunity to access those programs. Whatever they may be, recreation programs, they may be boating type issues, library, council on aging, all of those types of things. We want to be sure everyone is able to take advantage of those programs. From an economic development perspective, I have a pretty good set of tools relative to economic development going back to my days in Rockingham and Bellows Falls, Vermont, which was a mill town that had seen better days. It was a paper mill town. We had to do some infrastructure work to get it up and going. We had an upgrade to the wastewater treatment facility, had way more gallons than it was ever going to use again because the paper mills were gone. Tied in a town across the river, replaced water mains, 30% of the water mains, ran a force main up to the industrial park, and then started my work with the regional economic development organizations. We started to bring in companies, some right from out of a garage. Ben & Jerry's came to town for a while, those types of things. And we had to be able to work, put financing package together, put tax increment financing or district increment financing together to make those types of things work. When I look at Southbridge, and I've spent almost 3 full days in Southbridge, walking Main Street, walking down Central Street, going out beyond the AO, the former AO facility, going out to the Connecticut line on 198. I see a lot of effort that's already gone in to Southbridge, but I see when I come into Main Street, even though there's a lot of empty storefronts right now, which isn't unusual for a lot of main streets in the Commonwealth, especially some of the older communities. My hometown of Greenfield is similar to that right now. I see the bones of a really good downtown. I see the architecture, the structures themselves, and working with the Economic Development Office and the Economic Development Commission, I think that I can bring those tools together that I have and work with them to really start rebranding, if you will, Southbridge with what the council sees as that. That's going to be one of those consensus building exercises, while at the same time maintaining the budget, looking at the facilities in town. I've walked by the police station, the fire station. Fire station's an old beast. Town hall, the library, that went out to the Council on Aging. I have the capacity, and I've had to do it, to look at facility structure. We did a facilities management plan for the town of Bourne. Look at your capital expenditures, look at your capital plan, look at your debt, how your debt is coming off and going on. You're in one of the few towns like Bourne that I know that built a school within its budget without asking for an override. Mm-hmm. That's hard to do. And that puts a lot of pressure on the other departments and on your debt. So I'm familiar with that. I'm good at it. I think if you ask anyone in Bourne what my strengths were, they'll tell you both budgetary and the long view of economic development.
Thank you. Councilor Steves?
Thank you. First off, before I ask my specific question, I want to do a follow-up to what he just asked, which is, you mentioned that some of the businesses that you had worked with came right out of the garage. I was hoping that if you could kind of expand on that a little bit and give me some ideas of how you would help encourage like micro businesses and home-based businesses and small farms and things like that.
Excuse me. So we went prospecting. I had an economic development director. We went prospecting. We had seminars. We put together the state and federal assets that were available, be it, and this was in a different state, but be it mass development, be it Department of Housing and Community Development. I know that you're currently in a regional grant application to EOHCD for some micro business program. Mm-hmm. And if that's successful, that's one of the things you're going to be able to do to help some of the downtown and maybe some of the cottage industries, that not just the barbers, but the hairdressers that have something in their home as a second, that type of thing. But there is always talent within the community that you can draw upon. There's business captains of industry, if you will, in town that if you ask in the right way are willing to serve and willing to help smaller businesses. There's SCORE. There's all these different types of organizations that you can bring in to work with it. I had a long chat today with Jose at the Latino Business Organization, and we spoke for probably 45 minutes today. I just wanted to know what his thoughts were on what the town could be doing or what the town is doing and how we could perhaps forge partnerships there too. There's a number of different ways that we can do this, and I think by facilitating and working with the state agencies and the economic development agencies right here in town, there's quite a bit that can be done.
Okay, thank you. And the question that I was going to specifically ask is finance related. As everybody's aware of, the COVID-19 pandemic has shown us that local communities need to be more fiscally flexible, and that our long-distance supply chain system may not be reliable enough to meet our needs. Yet we still have the big ticket issues to address, such as providing basic services, maintaining public infrastructure, and handling stormwater. Please give us some examples of how you've balanced such fiscal needs with ecological reality and get the citizens to support making the community more resilient for the long term.
In Bourne, when I walked into Bourne, of course during the interview process everything was fine. It didn't snow, you could golf in the wintertime, and the politics were easy. The first day, the first email I got from the finance director was that, oh, by the way, your health insurance is $1.5 million upside down, and we were self-insured. We were self-insured. So we had to attack that, and we brought together, it was a town structure, so we had a finance committee, and the select board, and the unions together to try to figure out how we were going to address this issue. With a lot of work and some concessions, we were able to bring right that ship, if you will, and put the town on a trajectory toward sustainability. That created, and there was a small override to help with that, and there was a lot of effort to go in to get that override passed. There's only been 2 general overrides in Bourne since the passage of Prop 2.5 in 1981. So when you ask about the balance of the ecological community...
Balancing finances and ecology, yeah.
You have to make it a priority. You have to have good plans in place where, I don't know if you have a lot of wetlands in town. I haven't really done that kind of mapping yet. I haven't looked at the GIS of that. But you need a strong conservation commission that has the backing of the council. And as I was looking at the books today, or it was last week, you have 2 members, permanent members of the Conservation Commission that are currently vacant. And you have 1 permanent member of the Board of Health, which is currently vacant. And those are very important groups to have at full speed as much as you can, especially with the health department right now with the whole COVID thing. It's hard to balance that, but sometimes you can use CPA money to help with some of these ecological issues. We were able to utilize CPA money for a number of different things, be they walking trails or put things into trust under the care and custody of the Conservation Commission, provided that there was sometimes an offset for the economic development needs of the town as well. The infrastructure piece that you asked about, that's really something that with your enterprise fund, you have to be sure that you're funding your water and sewer, your enterprise funds, at a sustainable level where you can take on small capital without having to go into debt. With your current debt load at about 10%, You don't want to be increasing that debt margin too much. You want to be able to see if you can break some of that off and then try to level it out within your capital expenditure plan. So I would look at making sure that your fee structures are correct and that your usage, I congratulated the DPW director because you have a good fee system where you charge more for more being used. That's not universal, and that is a good way for conservation issues as well as being able to plan some of your capital. I don't know what you're doing with your stormwater needs in your MS4 through DPW, but that's another way that you can perhaps create a revenue source that would cover the cost of compliance with MS4.
I'd like to follow up on that specifically. You mentioned, you might raise a couple of things I'd like to follow up on. One is the stormwater issue, because we are going to have to, I don't know if Bourne has done it yet, but we're certainly going to have to figure out a way to fund stormwater issues in town. Have you any experience doing that, and how would you go about getting community buy-in to do it? Because that can be really costly.
We did not tackle that in Bourne because there was sufficient cash flow as we went forward. We built up our reserves and we were able to do that. We didn't have a large enterprise fund for water and sewer. We only had, the water departments were separate. They were separate districts. And we had a very small wastewater piece. But other towns have looked to square footage of roof.
Yep.
And what that stormwater is. That's really hard to sell to the business owners in town. It's a hard one. And I'm not sure in Southbridge today that would be the first thing I would tackle, given some of the other needs of the community.
Right.
But it's certainly, there are ways to look at it. There are communities that have done some really good things with it, and we have a good network through the Managers Association as well as the MMA and ICMA on how to perhaps take a look at these things in a different light. That may be second tier after you look at some of your other capital needs in town.
Okay. And further following up, you mentioned the Conservation Commission and Board of Health having vacancies, and just for clarification, most people here know, but my fiance is on the Conservation Commission. How would you go about recruiting new people and training them? Making sure that they go through the process to get trained, because sometimes that's an issue with some of our boards.
The Mass Association of Conservation Commissions and the Mass Association of Health Boards do a very good job in training both online as well as their annual and semi-annual conferences, which may not happen this year for obvious reasons. I was able to put in with the select board and the town meetings approval, because it was a different form, substantial amount of money in for professional development for all of the bargaining units as well as the boards and committees. I'm also a fan of utilizing peers. Peer groups are very good coming in. Maybe Sturbridge is doing something that we're not here in Southbridge, and they've done it successfully. Maybe you bring those folks in and they can present to the council or to the individual boards themselves. And then through your goal setting with each of the departments, one of the things may be professional development, and how are you going to train, or how are you going to suggest and encourage your board, the committee, to be trained. With the way the appointment powers are set up in the charter, that would be something that I would certainly emphasize during any recruitment or interview process for those positions.
And the last follow-up question is, you brought up CPA, and unfortunately we don't have CPA. It would be nice if we did, but I don't know how much of that would be a particularly hard sell given the financial situation of many of our residents.
Right.
How would you go about either A, promoting such an idea, or B, finding another way to do things that wouldn't require CPA funding?
So I'm certainly not going to recommend a 1, 2, or 3% surcharge on a tax rate that is already pushing $20, okay?
Right.
I think that that would take a lot of study, and I'm not prepared to answer that intelligently.
Right.
But what you can do is take parts of your stabilization account. You've done a very good job of building up your stabilization account to well over 6% of your operating budget. But there may be one-time revenues that come in that you can set capital stabilization or specific stabilization accounts that are dedicated funds for that particular purpose. Perhaps in conservation, if there's fees charged for utilization of conservation lands, those can be dedicated in a revolving account for that type of purpose as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Ryan.
Thank you. Just a kind of a follow-up question since it's on finance. What is your experience and position on single versus split tax rates in your experience?
What we found in Bourne, and that's what I can, is that the differential, we didn't have as much industrial property as Southbridge, but a lot of your industrial property right now isn't being utilized either. We found that if we split the tax rate to save $0.50 on the tax rate for the residential property, we had our assessors do this every year when they came to us for the public hearing on setting the tax rate. I appointed the assessors in Bourne, just so people are aware. To save $0.50 would have raised the industrial or commercial tax by $1.50 to $2. And it didn't make sense to do that. It made sense if you're at 80%, 75% and above residential and 20 to 25% or 30% commercial industrial, you really have to look at it to see what the return on investment is versus the stress you're putting on the property, the commercial and industrial property owners. Not studying that for the town of Southbridge, I can't answer that clearly, but that's, to get above 30, 35%, it's something that I would look at, but I'd also look at the rest of the demographics and the rest of the financial impacts of what's going on with those vacant mills and what you're trying to do with some of those as well.
Thank you.
Councilor McKay, follow up?
My follow-up is going back to the leadership management style. I would want to know if you talk about being a coach, team type of person, but I would want to know, are you an independent thinker? And that you're not easily swayed by members of the staff or people in management position in the town hall?
Okay. So there's a difference between, you can be a team player, you can be a coach, if you will, the word, but at the end of the day, the decisions have to be made, and sometimes they're not popular, and sometimes they're not what the departments expect. There's kind of a three-prong approach to what I consider decision-making models. One is we get everybody in a room together and we sing Kumbaya and we come to consensus and we move forward. And that works on some things. Other times you're going to go into the department leaders or the boards, and this is something that the council could certainly use too, and say, I need your help on this, I need your input, I need to know what you're thinking about this. You have some better expertise and depth of knowledge than I do, but at the end of the day, the decision is mine, and I have to bring this to the council as a recommendation. Or it may be a day-to-day operational thing that we just go forward with. The third is, really nice to hear from you, but I have to make this decision today, and we're going to move forward with this, and this is how we're going to implement it. You try to do that less than you do the second, but there are times when you have to do that. And I also want to state, where I said familiar and not formal, and you use the word coach, I am not afraid to change out staff if staff isn't living up to their potential after giving the ability to do professional development and training and guidance and working with them and putting them on a plan and all of those types of things. I've had to hire and I've had to dismiss department heads that were not working out well. So there's both of those.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
If I can follow up, back on Councilor Ryan's question again. You mentioned the split tax rate, and I was curious if you've had any experience with residential exemptions or small business exemptions. We've talked about those too.
We had some residential exemptions. There's some senior exemptions as well. I don't remember working with small business exemptions. Mm-hmm. There are certainly some things you can do. They're not exemptions, but it's targeting the tax money, if you will, and with district increment finance or tax increment finance. Mm-hmm. But no, the short answer to that is I have not worked with that in any degree.
Okay.
That's it. All right, we'll move on. Councilor Daniel.
Thank you. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Like most Massachusetts communities, Southbridge is very dependent upon property taxes as its major source of revenue for services and capital investments, which can put a strain on residential taxpayers. What experience do you have with creative forms of revenue?
Creativity is often stifled by the Commonwealth in some of the regulations they have on what towns can and can't do. However, there are small pots, if you will. It's really hard when your tax levy is 50% of your budget. In your school department is some 50% of your budget as well. It's really hard to look at creative structures for fees. Certainly there are, within your economic development realms, new industries, there are, linkages that they used to call it linkage, now they, call it fees, development fees that you can bring in and dedicate those to specific areas. But unless you're going to diversify your tax rate, which I really don't think right now is something that I can answer well, I don't see a lot of alternatives to offset the general property tax rate, except for the increase of the industrial and commercial base.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Catrone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Thomas. Thank you for interviewing with us this evening. Talk a little bit about project management. Please tell us about any significant municipal projects you have managed in your past roles. Also, how do you manage the organization and yourself to stay on top of the myriad issues and projects and make sure that things get accomplished?
So if you're talking large projects, capital project management, the best thing to do is to have a really good owner's project manager. Okay, that's, but we have done major projects in all of my tenure, except for the Rural Development Council, where that wasn't part of our charge. In Bourne, we constructed a new DPW facility during my tenure, 2 new schools during my tenure, a boat ramp, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but it was a $650,000 project that we brought handicapped accessibility in and things like that. So those types of projects I was intimately involved with, especially the first school, the Bourndale Elementary School. We were just finishing up, or the town is just finishing up on a $17 million police department that we passed with the new DPW, with the new school in the same debt exclusion. It was a $41 million debt exclusion. So you have good project managers, you have good building committees, and maybe a standing building committee is something where that could be considered. And though that committee, and I was always at the meetings, and the OPMs and the good engineering firms, you'd stay on top of it that way, and you'd ask for PERT charts and find out where we were and if there was a delay. We're also building a small wastewater treatment facility there. Small, 100,000 gallon a day, just for downtown. Other projects, you have other project management, if you will, more municipally. I think the Munis conversion is one of those, is an example of that. Perhaps DPW is looking to change over. Of course, you contract that out. We did trash pickup, and we did a conversion from an old-fashioned three people on a truck, two on the back, to two on a truck with a different type of pickup, to converting to one on a truck with a pincher. And that was a 5-year project to do. So there are those types of projects as well. And you stay on top, you get briefed, on the big projects, I'd want at least a bi-weekly, every other week update, and then at least monthly meetings. I also want to know where the finances are on those every time, and that's where your finance department comes involved and your treasurer comes involved to see how your bonding is doing and what rate you're getting, what's the premium you're getting back, those types of things as well.
Thank you. Follow-up?
Yeah, absolutely.
In Southbridge, the town's about to seek funding for a large capital project, our fire station. Describe your approach to working with the town council to fund a project such as this.
So my understanding on that is that the plans are complete. There is a location, although there's been some hiccup to that location recently, I understand, with some of the business that may be going into a similar area. To finance it, I'm not sure if it was a $25 or a $50 million job. I don't recall, and I apologize.
How much did you say?
25?
25.
Yeah. That is a big commitment by the taxpayers to undertake. But one of the things we did, especially with the police department, is, and you may have already done this, we had visits. We had open houses for people to come in and take a look at what kind of shape this building was in and why it wasn't functional anymore and why we have to have our trucks made specially because they don't fit in the doors anymore. All of those types of things for the fire. And we then looked to other funding agencies. Does FEMA have anything that may be eligible? Can you look to the, being a little creative, can you look to the CARES Act for any funding in noting that the air quality in that building isn't any good anymore? Is there something you can tack on there to get some funding for that? Does USDA, even though you're a little bit bigger, you still may be in an encatchment area for USDA to help with that? Your borrowing rates right now are probably as good as they're ever going to be. You're not going to get the same type of premium back because your bond rating being at a AA minus, you're not going to get the premium back that you would if you were AAA. But the rates are low right now, and it may be the time to put a full court press on to advocate for this building to the citizenry. What needs to be done when you're advocating for those types of facilities is, what is the return for the citizen? What are we going to get out of this? Our response time is going to be better. What's the long-term savings on our trucks if we don't have to have them specially made anymore? Is there going to be a community room there that can be used? If another tornado comes into town, is there a way that we're going to be able to set that up as a center for people, a type of thing? Can we set up our emergency operations center there as well? So you have to look at beyond fire and ambulance. What are the other things that you're going to be able to bring forward as attributes to the community for this?
Thank you.
I have a follow-up on that because I'm intricately involved in this project. What do you see the role of a town manager in this project? I mean, is it I form a committee and I'm hands-off, and throughout the 5 years you just sit back, or are you intimately involved in working as a partner, or how do you envision the town manager's role in this whole process?
The town manager has to be involved in a leadership form with the council and with whatever committee is set up from the beginning of this process to the day that they put a shovel in the ground. That's working to maybe community meetings, it may be looking at different financing, it may be going to the legislature and asking for some help with that, it may, working with maybe with mass development, there may be something there. There may be something with mass works that you can do if it's tied, well, you're gonna do some mass works work, if you will, down in that area too. So what else can be tied in to make the whole project more, I don't wanna say pretty isn't the word, but pleasing to the entire community. The manager has to be involved with the finance department, specifically the treasurer on that, to know where your financing is. When you, again, I don't want to become redundant, but you have to look at where your debt's coming off and where you're going to be able to put some debt on to kind of keep it level. You don't want it doing this because it really messes with your tax rate on an annual basis. And you go out and you do the community TV interviews. You bring the chair of the building committee, if there is such a thing, to those. You bring the building committee of the council to these meetings. It's a partnership. But at the end of the day, it's the manager's job to bring you the numbers and bring you what he or she thinks is going to be the most beneficial to the town, in hope that the council, as the primary of the town, you're the chief elected officials, is going to hopefully support the work that has been done by the manager and his staff.
So on overall projects then, not just fire station building project, but whatever projects you do, a central dispatch project, a dog kennel, a $100,000 dog kennel, how do you envision your role as town manager in that project management? I mean, is it, okay, here you go, I gave it off to the police chief and said, you do the dog kennel and sit back and wait for it to be done, or what's the role of the town manager in that?
We contracted that out to a service instead of having a kennel of our own, and that worked very well for where we were. It depends on the project. If it's a $10 million project or a $20 million project, that's going to take a little bit more time and energy than a $2 million project. And I would expect that when you have professionals and administrative support staff, that they can, with the manager, work through that project. But when it comes to the construction piece of it, that's not the police chief's job. The police chief, if you will, relative to the kennel or the dispatch center, they're not construction engineers. They may know what they want, they may know where they want it, but you have to be involved with the week to week. There's generally a project meeting every week with the engineer and the builder and that type of thing. And either you assign someone to that specifically, be it through the DPW or be it someone here in town, in City Hall, or you attend to them yourself. But sometimes the small projects are can be the most needle burdened, okay? You're gonna get poked with the smaller ones perhaps more than the real big ones. But you need to be as engaged in taking a leadership role as the project demands. Not all things are created equal.
Okay. Councilor
Yeah, a quick
Steve?
follow-up
and
on
then
a
you all
slightly
set?
different kind of project that we have coming down
Can't
the
hear you.
pike.
I can't hear
I'm
you.
sorry. A follow-up on a slightly different kind of project that we have coming down the pike is that we are in the process of looking out how we're going to figure out to transition our curbside collection, our trash collection system. Do you have any experience dealing with that kind of an issue? In the fact, I mean, our landfill recently closed, and so we're trying to figure out what we're going to do with that kind of stuff. And do you have any experience doing that?
So Bourne had a municipal landfill, a regional municipal landfill that was about a $13.5 million enterprise fund. We run it ourselves, they run it themselves, excuse me. We had a staff of 26 in the town. DPW did the trash pickup, and it was free. And it used to be twice a week, but it was free, trash and recycling. We went to a single stream recycling program from a source separated recycling program. And as I said earlier, we were transitioning from one type of pickup to another type of pickup, but it was going to be municipal. We looked a few years ago to see if that was the best way for us to go, and I would suggest, if it hasn't been done, that you may want to, if this contract is running out in 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, that you may want to bid, that you may want to do a cost estimate on doing it internally, and it may not be the thing that the city council or the town council wants to do. But you may want to look at it and see what the cost would be, the capital cost, and hiring a few more people. What's the benefit cost of that's going to be? What's your workers' compensation going to increase on that? Because those are generally pretty high-end workers' comp type jobs. They're less when there's a claw than when there's two guys on the back or two people on the back of the truck. Mm-hmm. When we did a cost analysis of it, it became in Bourne, and that wouldn't be necessarily the way it is here in Southbridge, it was just about a wash of contracting it out to waste management or pick a firm, or doing it or continuing to do it internal. We opted through the select board and working with the Board of Health, because the Board of Health really governed the trash. We opted to keep it internal. But it may be something to look at. You have, I know, right now about $4 million in your landfill fund, for lack of a better term, but some of that is being set aside, if you will, because there's some issues with the water problems that in Charlton, and I know you've hooked on to Charlton, or Charlton's hooked on to you. And I just want a quick aside. When that intermunicipal agreement is looking to come to an end, and Charlton wants to take it over themselves and not have Southbridge continue to do whatever it is they're doing. I've worked on a number of IMAs and extracting from IMAs, and I think I could be helpful with that as well.
Thank you.
Kind of diverted from the question, but.
Well, that's an important issue too. So,
Thank you.
Did you have a follow-up question, or you want to move on? Okay. Councilor Dow.
Can you please describe your economic development experience with specific example of how your attended business grown and retention, and will this idea work in Southbridge?
So, I hate to keep starting the same sentence with so, but in Bourne, Main Street was a wasteland. And people in Bourne will tell you that. When the military base reduced the number of their missions back in the 70s and 80s, Main Street pretty much dried up because there wasn't the traffic. There were a number of dilapidated buildings, vacant buildings. We applied through the Cape Cod Commission, which is the Cape's regional planning organization. It's different than the Central Mass or the Blackstone Valley Regional Planning Commission in as much as it had a layer of regulatory authority relative to the size of buildings before it had to go to a regional review. We applied for and obtained a growth incentive zone or an opportunity zone for that, which allowed us to increase our density as well as the number of housing units and commercial units that could be within this particular zone. Really, if you've been to Bourne or if you've been from Rotary to Rotary on Main Street, from the two Rotaries. And it took a lot of work with the town planner, with the town administrator's office, with conservation, with the Financial Development Corporation, which was active at the time. And we went to work. And it took 10 years. It wasn't a short fix. And that's why you have to have the, and you've been working a long time on downtown, and so you're not at the beginning, but it's a long view. We ended up getting 3 new restaurants downtown. We redid a park we didn't have a town common per se. We redid the park, put a splash pad and playground in there as well. Worked really hard to bring a hotel to the area on the canal. There was an additional 208 units that are currently being constructed of market rate, mostly 1 and 2 bedroom apartments, workforce housing, if you will. We brought an assisted living facility on the other end, in which we were able to do some development fees on that because they wanted to come in as a 40B, and there was no way that we were going to be able to put affordables, if you will, into that particular type of unit. So we were able to negotiate some development fees for that as well. And that went really well. Now, the other thing that we were able to do on the other side of the bridge, there's a company called Hydroid. They make remote submarines, little submarines that go find planes that go down in the ocean and those types of things. They do other things as well. They were looking to expand and add a couple hundred jobs. The regulatory requirements of the commission, anything over 9,900 square feet, required a project of regional impact. It was difficult. We were able to work with the commission staff, and not bypass it, but make sure that those hearings in that development had smooth sailing going through. And that's just another example of what we did in Bourne. In Bellows Falls, in Rockingham, Vermont, we did an awful lot of things up there too that I spoke about earlier.
Any follow-up? The primary focus of economic development of the downtown revitalization and bringing new businesses to the town.
Joe, excuse me, council down. You got to speak into the mic, because there you go.
The town industry park, do you have any specific experience with a project similar to this? How will you tackle this project? How will you address the challenge of limited highway access?
So the industrial park issue, provided that there is sufficient infrastructure there for water and sewer and capacity, it becomes a marketing issue. It becomes work with your state partners, your private partners, your neighboring communities as well. A new job in Southbridge is good for Sturbridge. It's good for Connecticut, the towns on the Connecticut side. It's good for Charlton. If you work in a regional capacity on some of these things, it's helpful. The Economic Development Administration, I know you're working on a project was brought forward to you a few weeks ago on that. There's some money that's maybe available there. Now, when you talk about the lack of good highway getting in and out, that has been a problem in a number of communities I've worked in, both in Rockingham, Vermont, which was kind of stuck between two exits of Route 91, and there wasn't anything in between. You had especially in the village area, in the very dense village area, and in Bourne, you had to go over the bridge, and no one wants to go over the bridge. No one wants to do that with a truck in May, June, July, August, and September now. So what we needed to do is look for those industry that were not necessarily semi 16-wheeler or 18-wheeler heavy, and bring in, everyone wants clean, high-tech industry that doesn't have an environmental impact on the community. Everybody wants that. But there are ways to be able to do that, and I would look to the city of Lowell as an example. They had hundreds of thousands of square feet of vacant industrial property that they've been able, they got a federal park too. I mean, they got some help with it. But there are ways that you can bring in, perhaps set up not an incubator per se, because incubators don't always work out the way you want them to, but certainly like a commerce center, but on a smaller scale, maybe an artist community, maybe something that you can do for digital tech that may be intrigued by the housing costs that are pretty good here as compared to being in the city. How can you extract that out? You're not going to change the routes coming in and the routes going out. They're not going to put a spur off the turnpike here anytime in the near future. But there are different ways, if you look at it, that you market and you work with the regional development agency. Maybe you work with the city of Worcester. I don't know, but there are ways to utilize space and to bring in smaller industries. Maybe they're not 30,000 or 100,000 square foot facilities. Maybe it's a Coca-Cola distribution facility that they're going to need some traffic, but it's not going to be huge. They're not huge trucks, and you have a good central hub for getting into Sturbridge and getting down into Connecticut and getting over to Auburn. Those may be the types of things that you want to look at. I would have to do a lot more study to give you a really in-depth answer.
Thank you. Councilor Adams?
Just a couple questions, Tom. You mentioned earlier opportunity zones within Bourne. Were those your opportunity zones within the local municipality, or were we talking the federal side?
They were not the federal opportunity zone that came up a couple of years ago through the Department of Commerce. I will tell you a quick story about that without getting too into the weeds, but this was a growth incentive zone, which was something that the Cape Cod Commission put forward to help distressed areas on the Cape. Downtown Hyannis received a growth incentive zone, and Buzzards Bay, the village of Bourne, received a growth incentive zone. The federal opportunity zone, we were designated as an economic development priority. That's not the word they use, but through the EDA. And when we looked at the opportunity zone, I actually worked very closely with Senator DiMacedo on that at the time. It was the tracks that they had. They have it set up in census tracks. And the census tract that they had for Bourne was Joint Base Cape Cod, because the wages of some of the military folks isn't that high, and they fell into that zone. Well, the Commonwealth wasn't going to give us land on Joint Base Cape Cod to do this, neither were the federal armed forces. The law said that you could go to an adjacent census tract. Well, it made sense to us. The adjacent census tract was across the bridge and into Buzzards Bay. We did that, and we were denied. So, but the answer was it was a local or a regional growth incentive zone.
So, Mr. Chair, just to follow up on that question, then Town of Southbridge has two opportunity zones located here. One, I think, the Globe Village area, and I think around Main Street somewhere. Now, this is private. How would you work with the private industry or these companies to invest in their own company while being able to take advantage of the opportunity zones of the federal tax breaks? Or incentives, I should say.
So one of the ways is a tax stabilization program that the city council could enter into, different than a tax increment finance, just a true tax stabilization program. If you build, commercial retail on the first floor, office space on the second floor, and bring in affordable or market rate units on your third, and if there are any fourth floors on these areas, we can offer you maybe 60% for the first 5 years, 70% year 6, 80% year 7, that type of thing, till you're up to 100%. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is to spend, I'm not a big spender, but one of the ways to look at this is to look at how you're going to market the community, and there are companies out there that can help you. Buxton Corporation is a company that can help do some of the demographics on what would be workable from a retail and commercial perspective in a downtown area. They do not come cheap, and it's something that I would have to look at for the town of Southbridge, and if it made sense, and it would be a contract that I certainly would bring to the council and have to look at. That may not be the answer, but there are companies out there that can help you do that. The university can help you do that as well. Not just, you have UMass, but WPI may be able to help you with that. Clark may be able to help you with that. The land grants certainly are required to help with that. You may be able to get MIT in to help with that as well, because they are a second round of land grant universities. Those types of things. There's a number of ways you can do it, and maybe you work with, again, regionalization isn't necessarily a bad word. If it's going to bring to this community what the councilors in the citizenry want.
Thank you. All right. Councilor Marquet?
Good evening, and thank you for taking the time to come here tonight. First of all, I want to say that I did take a look at your resume. I thought I was very impressed with it, the fact that you're very familiar with different state agencies and mass general law. I was impressed with that. I did get a chance to watch your interview in Charlton, Massachusetts last year. And I have to say, I thought you were very honest and sincere with your answers. And that's where I got the team coach style of management. You mentioned that in your interview. So.
Okay. I knew I hadn't said it here yet tonight, but okay.
All right. So my question for you deals with citizen relations and transparency. Southbridge is a community with much diversity, which includes a significant Latino population. What is your experience in working with these populations, and how would you work to engage citizens in the issues of town government and help build a stronger sense of connection and community?
So the short answer to that is get out into the community and meet the citizenry where they are. I would work with the ecumenical community in town. I would work with the citizen advocacy groups that are in town, some of the state agencies that may be in town that have better outreach capacity than perhaps municipal staff can do. I would hold a Southbridge Government 101 each week or every couple of weeks. You would have a 2-hour or an hour-and-a-half seminar on what the town government does beyond what's in the charter. You could bring it out. You wouldn't have to have people come in to town hall. You could bring it out to community centers. You could bring it into downtown. There's a number of things you could do. And you have the police chief, for instance, on a particular day, or the finance director on a particular night, or conservation, because we've talked about that a little bit tonight, or DPW, or assessors. Why is my tax bill like this? People don't know, that type of thing. And you sit down and you have a 101 with them, and I could not do it bilingually. I'm not bilingual, but I certainly would have people here that could help with that. So those are the types of things I guess I would do. The other piece of citizen engagement, I'm going to kind of reverse that and say it has to do with customer service by the people in this building and outside this building. To follow up a little bit, when people come into the municipality, into town hall, they're looking to pay a bill, get a permit to do something with their land that they don't really know why they need a permit. They got a notice they don't understand. They want to start a business and they have to go through a routing slip. And it's generally they don't come in with unicorns and balloons. They may not know where to go. So one of the things I instilled in Bourne and in Rockingham and in Warren was that if John or Jane or Jose come into town hall and they go to the assessor's office, and where they really belong is the treasurer's office, don't point your finger and say, go down the hall here. That's not helping them. That's not helping the citizen with their issue. Get up out of your chair, walk that person down to the treasurer's office, say, this is John, Mary, Jose, whatever. They have an issue with this. Could you help them with it, please? And stay there until the other department gets up to help them. Those little actions on a daily basis create more goodwill, and they're important to do. It's not a PR thing, it's something you should do. We're paying people to be servants of the public. Those little things make a huge difference, and that word gets out just as fast as the nasties get out on the Facebook page.
Councilor Lazo, you have a phone?
Yes, follow up with Councilor Marchetti. We're talking about work to engage citizens, help to build stronger sense of connection to the community. A lot of citizens have been asking during the search, if you become the town manager of Southbridge, would you move to the town of Southbridge?
I will not move my family to the town of Southbridge for particular medical reasons that in an executive session I will discuss with you. I will be in Southbridge, just like I was in Bourne. It was a long commute from Bourne to Vernon. But I had an apartment in Westport, Mass for 11 of my 14 years, and then I had a room in an adjacent community for the last couple of years. So that I was first in, last out every day, most every day, unless I was going to be out of town. that when a storm hit, that I was in the EOC working with the emergency management director. We had hurricanes, we had floods, we had winter storms. There was, back in 15, we got hit 4 weekends in a row with nor'easters that came into the north coast of Bourne, and we were absolutely wrecked. We were without power for a week. We had to, everything was down, even the cell towers were down. You don't manage from your house. You manage from either the command center or your office. With the exception of one time when they did lose everything, it came in really quick and I was home. And I was able, because I had internet access, able to do a lot of management from there. But you will think you'll be wanting to get rid of me, go away for the weekend. That is not an issue that the city, that the council or the citizens of this town should be concerned with, is my presence and ability to be here, to be a part of the community, to go to the baseball tournament, to, if there's a football game or an academic or a school play or those types of things, you will see me here.
I think the intent of what the citizens were concerned with is we have many people that come to Southbridge, work for Southbridge, don't live in Southbridge, and I don't know, it's been an ongoing discussion about local residency, that if you pay the tax rate, you worry about the tax rate. Thank you.
Could I respond to that?
Go ahead.
You're correct, but no one was more, and you can call and ask, no one was more invested in the town of Bourne than I was. And it's not, you know, I pay taxes where I live, and I'm working somewhere else, and I'm eating my meals somewhere else, and I'm, you know, contributing to the local economy somewhere else. But I still, so it's kind of a balance, and there's two trains of thought of residency requirements or not. And I appreciate your point. It's well taken. All I can say to you in the council is, relative to my accessibility and my ability to do the job and put the time in and be invested with the youth groups and the ecumenical community and the business community, you will not find anyone who will be more in tune than I am.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. The Southbridge Public Schools are currently under the jurisdiction of a state-appointed receiver. What do you see as the town manager's role in working with the receiver in the school department and the school committee? And what type of relationships have you developed with state government and other stakeholders that would be beneficial to the town?
So I have not been in a town that has been in receivership before. That's not something that's frequent. Although in preparation for this interview, I did try on a couple of occasions to reach out to Dr. Villar, and it was holiday week, so you know we kind of missed connections. But I did then go to the web page and read what's on the school web page relative to that. I also spoke with a colleague, a former colleague of mine, who was intricately involved with the city of Springfield's entire receivership as part of the financial team there, to speak with her about how the relationship with the receiver works. You know, the receiver is put in a position to make some very difficult decisions, but it's still the town of Southbridge, and it's still the town of Southbridge youth, and it's still the town of Southbridge dollars. So while the receiver has a job to do, And I'm sure makes a lot of hard decisions that perhaps the school committee couldn't for a number of different reasons. That is not a reason to be subordinate to the receiver. And I know that there are members of the council that are on the board, the committee, if you will, with that. I have also reached out to DESE. I have a friend that works at DESE, and she provided me quite a bit of information relative to receivership and how the so I've kind of become familiar with how that works. But, and I also looked at the city of Lawrence, who did, I think the mayor of Lawrence just did an outstanding job during that difficult period. And I looked at Chelsea and I looked at Holyoke. So I've done some research. I haven't worked in a town like that. But I think that the citizen committee, the council, and there are members, as I said, of this committee on that, you know, there are times when you have to flex your municipal and your local chops to be sure that it's not just by formula, it's by what is in the best interest of the financial position of this community as well as the children of this community, because that's what it all boils down to at the end of the day.
Council Lazo has a follow-up, and then I'll defer back to you. Go ahead.
I think what we have to understand is that the only thing that we have is bottom line budget item to the school department. The administrative wages, the receiver's wages will not be sustainable in a normal situation if we took it back over. I think where the problem lies is not so much with the receiver as much as with DESE and the state don't know how to seem to have a plan of dismounting and handing back off to the community. And to Jack Jovan's credit as chairman and the council, financing has constantly been there for them. Communications through the chair has been paramount, meetings regularly, but the revolving door continues in the school district, and a lot of the stuff that's going on in the school district has not changed. If anything, it seems to slide. So as a town manager, you're put in a position to deal with this. I don't want to call it a crisis, but it is. I think it is. And in the future, it's something that if you become the town manager, how would you deal with that?
When you say revolving door counselor, are you talking teaching staff or are you teaching
All of the
administrative
above.
staff?
All of them.
Okay, thank you. Immersion, and don't mean that to be a fuzzy word, but that's another area where the manager, no matter who he or she is that you hire, is going to have to do a deep dive, and it's going to take some weekend work, and it's going to take some work in Boston, and it's going to take some, it's going to take some work with your local legislative delegation, and it's going to take some work with some of the communities that have already had this type of an issue, and what did they do to get the merry-go-round to stop, so you bring back some local control. I don't have the answer of how to do that because I haven't worked in it yet. But I do have the acumen with the state agencies and with the legislature. I would have to get to know your legislative delegation. And with folks that I have a contact in DESE that I could at least springboard things off of, and I would go to Lawrence, and I would go to Holyoke, and maybe have Holyoke or Lawrence or Chelsea or whatever come here. Now that was kind of all municipal, but Holyoke is really the schools, and maybe talk to Mayor Morse to see what his plan has been and how that's been working there. There are at the end of the day, the buck stops here. Okay, stops with you, stops with me, stops with the school committee. But at the end of the day, there are folks out there that can offer you professional and small p political assistance. And I would reach out to them as well.
Thank you.
Councilor Ryan?
Thank you. I just kind of want to follow up. I'm a former school board chair and member, so one of the things that we've noticed on the school board is a lack of interest in communicating with the school board and working with the school board on the receiver side. What would you do as a manager to help facilitate a working relationship between the council, the school committee, and the receiver, and your office? I know it's a loaded question.
That's okay. There's a flowery answer that I can give you on that we could, all have a cup of coffee and try to sing Kumbaya together, but that's not going to be the answer that you need. The manager, the school board, and the council, the school board and the city council representatives need to sit down and set a strategic plan. Rapid fire, not something that takes 6 months or a year, not a long-term goals and objectives session, but a SWOT strategic plan. Be firm, do homework, make sure that what our steps are legal, okay, A, and B, are going to have an effect to push communications better, if communication is the piece. We're not going to talk dollars or other things right now. The issue was communication. Bring them in. If you have to have a facilitated meeting, I don't think you should, and I don't know if you have, set it down. Here are the 5 issues that we have that you need to respond to us on because, and then have 5 or 6 or 7, how many there is, reasons as to why that are germane, that are fact-based, and that can be then distributed to the members of the community and the parents and the other folks involved who are concerned with this whole situation. And if they refuse at that point, then, which I don't think they would, I hope they wouldn't, then you have to start going over steps. You got to start going higher and higher until the squeaky wheel gets grease or someone from up the food chain prods someone down the food chain.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So time goes by fast, so thank you for all the answers. And in closing, thank you for being here tonight. Is there any questions of the council you'd like to ask before you have an opportunity to leave, or any closing thoughts at all?
I don't have any questions at this time. I think that the council has been very forthright with what I think the issues are here, and I haven't seen any questions sugar-coated, and I appreciate that, and I've tried not to sugarcoat answers. A couple of things in closing. One, I'm a good manager. I don't mean that, but I'm a good manager. I am a technician manager. I am not the person who's going to be out in front of the press every day trying to get his mug in the paper. I want to be in my office doing my job. I am someone who will make sure that every member of this council gets information in a timely manner and gets the same information in a timely manner. Even if that is, I don't have the answer to the question you have today or at the next council meeting. This is what I've been able to find. I need a little more time. I'm not shy to tell you that. I expect that the council will hold me accountable, and I expect that the council is going to be held accountable because you have a document in your charter that tells us all how things are supposed to work. I think that you will find, if you check on me, and I know some of you already have, you will find that I had a very good and frank relationship with my department leadership. I let them do their jobs. I counseled them when I thought their jobs could be done differently or better. And I had a good working relationship with other town and community agencies. I am not here as spend 3 years in Southbridge and move on to a bigger community. I'm on the other side of that now. I have another 7 to 10 years to work, and it is my hope that it's here. I am not going to bail on you. I like the challenge. There's a lot to do here. It's not bad. It's just a lot. And I have the tools over my tenure from an economic development, in finance, in legislative, in grants personship, in all of those types of things that I think this town would benefit from. And I really want to come to work here.
Thank you. Thank you for being here tonight. So from here, Thursday night, we'll be meeting to discuss the results of tonight's interviews. And at that time, we'll make a decision one way or another. But we thank you for being here tonight, and best of luck.
Thank you so much for having me. I was thrilled to get the call to be coming back. I enjoyed the first interview. And I'm sure by the time I get 15 miles out of town, I'm going to say to myself, this was a good time too. So it was all good, and I wish you all well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll stand in recess for 5 minutes while we change positions and get the next